Just like mastering the art of French cooking is a must-read for cooks, for yogis, especially yoga teachers. This book, The Anatomy of Movement, is one of our most important books. We learn about the anatomy, how the body moves, therefore creating better alignment in each of our poses. So just like Julie Powell went through mastering the art of French cooking, recipe by recipe, I decided to dive into the anatomy of movement, just taking one section at a time and applying it to the yoga practice. Let's begin by coming to a seated pose. Seated on a chair or on the floor or on the mat, cross your legs and find the sitz bones, also known as the ischial tuberosity. As you draw your flesh away from your sit bones, see if you can move the flesh just to the side so you feel much more rooted. Allow your hands to rest on your thighs and move in circles, make them small to begin with. The section we're working on in anatomy of movement is on the hips. We'll be opening the hips in order to come just a little bit deeper in some of our poses. You can come the opposite direction now, just making circles. This allows you to come to the forward, the back and middle part of the ischial tuberosity. Now just go forward and back in the sagittal plane and go side to side so that you feel just all parts of this bone that's kind of like a rocker on a rocking chair. For the next pose, you might need some props. I have either a washcloth, a small block, or a blanket that I can use. As you come to a pinwheel pose, which has your right shin forward, kind of like what we do in pigeon pose, notice the back leg, the hip, is lifted. So unlike the last position we were in, where we were able to feel the sit bones as we moved in circles, we were able to root down through two sit bones. Now it feels like most of your weight is on one sit bone. Slide something under that lifted sit bone. Oh, this block is way too high for me. So I'm going to use the blanket so that I'm seated. I can feel the sit bone rooting down on this lifted side. So my pelvis feels so much more stable. Keeping that, you can use your right hand to keep rooting down through the left sit bone. And over time, you'll see that you'll be able to reduce the height because your hips get a little bit more open each time you do this. Keeping a nice alignment of the spine and rooting down through the left sit bone. See if you can do just a little bit of a twist. Just take the left hand to the outside of the right knee or right thigh and turn your gaze in the direction of the right knee. And now let's do the counter twist. Take your left hand to the back foot, turn the opposite direction, release out of the pose, come to the opposite side, same thing, take the legs in that pinwheel position. You might find that on this side, the hip is a little bit closer or farther from the earth. So again, you have to customize so that you can get both sit bones to feel rooted. I'll try with the washcloth, sneaking that right under the right sit bone. On this side, the right sit bone feels nice and rooted and anchored. Keep that and draw once again into the twist. Take the right hand to the outside of the left thigh as you twist in one direction, with the left hand pressing down to allow you to draw into the right sit bone even more fully in your pose to get this nice alignment. And do the twist in the opposite direction, enabling you to put a little bit more weight on the right sit bone. Come back out of the twist. Lie on your back. Bend your knees. You can either grab hold of your right heel, or for most of us, it might work better to take a strap around the base of the toes and hold on to the strap in the right hand. Now make circles as if you're riding a bicycle, you're pedaling. Just make circles just to help lubricate the hip area, get a little bit more freedom of movement. And now make imaginary circles to the right, left, and down. You might want to start making bigger circles now that we've been doing this for a bit. And release your leg as you're ready. Just feel the difference now between your right leg and your left leg. Draw your left leg in. If you have the freedom to hold on to your foot and do the movement, that's great. But most of us probably prefer using a strap. So grab your strap, place it around the base of the toes as if you're pedaling a one-pedal bicycle. Just small circles to begin with, and slightly bigger. And now take the foot to go far to the left in a circle, to the right. Not too fast. And this really serves you nicely for the yoga pose supta padangustasana, to really open up the pelvis nicely. The first pose we did to open up the pelvis for a nice pigeon pose, perhaps. And now the supine pose we'll also do seated. So you can release your left foot down. And once again, notice how the pelvis feels, and see if you can get lots of freedom of movement by pressing your hands right at the hip points, those bony parts of the hip that kind of jut out. Lift the hip points up into your palms and draw back. It's as if you're lifting the waistline off the mat and pressing it back. You may have a lot of movement here after working the hips like we did. Now roll over to your side to lift yourself up to come to a seated pose. Let's try that in the seated pose. As we did before, if you can hold onto the foot and do that movement that we did, that one pedal bicycle movement, without collapsing in the low back. You want to keep the curve by creating this little kickstand with your left hand as you do that. But many of us, no, I'll say most of us, need to use the strap, to take the strap around the foot and do that movement. It just gives us a little bit more freedom. So now we've done this forward and back movements. Now see if you can make imaginary circles with the foot. And release. Let's do the same movement with the left leg, and you might have a little bit more freedom to use your hand at the heel to do these movements or not. And if that's the case, grab the strap, do some movement. Nice preparation, especially in the morning or after we've been seated for a long time. Now do the movement way to the left, right, left, big circles. And release the foot. So now that the hips are so nice and open, let's practice our squats. Squats are just natural for children, but not so natural for us as adults. In some third world countries, you'll find a lot of adults squatting, but our lifestyle has really tightened our hip flexors. But these movements that we've just done will create a little bit more openings. If you've got a chair, grab it. Let's just see how squatting to a high height worked for us before lowering ourselves down. Without the use of your hands, with your feet slightly wider apart for stability, bend your knees, take your pelvis close to the chair seat, and land easily. No problem. That was a version of a squat. Now that we know that we've got the action down, we can go a little bit deeper. By creating a seat slightly lower, I've created a seat that's 7 inches lower than the regular chair seat. So you can practice again by taking your feet wider than hip width apart, bend your knees, draw the tops of the thighs back, and just naturally the heart comes forward to lower yourself down to sit. And try that a few more times. Without the use of your hands, you lift up and you come down to sit, lowering yourself oh so easily. You root down to lift yourself up and slowly take yourself down. I have another video on squats, and I have us practice with the heels lifted on a blanket or something. In this practice, we'll keep our heels down and just work to keep a nice ease. It's that last part that's really challenging. You go down a little bit faster. Lift up. Now let's see if we can go a little bit lower. You slowly, slowly, slowly draw your pelvis down. And it's tough to get that last little bit. The pelvis just wants to land a little bit too firmly. We'll try several repetitions. You lift up and draw down. Maybe if we help ourselves out by using the arms, with the arms forward, we can land so much more smoothly. As we keep lowering, we continue the practice by lowering ourselves to a lower platform to see how low we can go with our heels down, with the tops of the thighs moving back, slowly, slowly, slowly. Not so slow that time. Taking ourselves down. And as we practice, we maintain a nice stability. We're lubricating the hips. We're getting a nice opening in the lumbar spine. And finally, without blocks, let's try it. I had a teacher in New York City when I was practicing there that told us that she used New York City phone books. These were back in the days where phone books were really thick. She knew her progress as she took pages off of the phone book, which was a great idea, but we don't have phone books like that anymore. We don't have phone books at all. So as you bend your knees, you can just reach your arms out for a counterbalance and come on down into the pose. Maybe even take your hands in this prayer position. Enjoy your breath. Now let's see if we can slowly come out of the pose as well. Thank you so much, Blandine Calais-Germain and Andre Lamont, for your great teachings in Anatomy of Yoga that so help us in our yoga practice, especially as we come closer to Malasana or squat. Namaste.